Stephen Collins, as an archaeologist, has made some significant discoveries that I know you'll be astounded, as well as those viewing this will be astounded. So without further ado, let's give a rousing Wingmen round of applause for Dr. Stephen Collins.
I think I'm on, yeah. Well, good morning. I get the distinct pleasure or challenge this morning of getting you really excited at what? 7:45 in the morning about geography and archaeology. Wow! That's hard enough to do any time of day. But what I want to show you this morning, I think, is impactful, and I'm going to save my comments about that to the end of the presentation. But let me introduce you to our new book that just came out this year, published by Simon & Schuster, Discovering the City of Sodom. This is a non-technical presentation of the last 10, actually going all the way back to 1996, but really the last 10 years of work in the field in Jordan, excavating the site of Sodom. And this chronicles fighting with the liberal community, fighting with the liberal critics regarding this. But I think some things have really come together in the last several years, and now things are moving forward. Let me give you a couple of little pointers here on how to get to the information about what we do. This will get you to the book, discoveringsodom.com. That'll get you to about 7 or 8 different outlets where you can get it. Of course, Amazon usually has it cheaper than anybody else, but Barnes & Noble, Mardel, others are on there. Here's another one. digsodom.com is the official excavation website. We are a joint scientific project with the Department of Antiquities in the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. Our contract with them is unprecedented, actually. It takes us through the 2020 season. I think I'm going to be going up there on a walker or something by then. That sounds like way out there in the future. That dig site, digsodom.com, will get you all the technical information that you want, plus a lot of other fun stuff as well, so you can keep up with us. The other thing is, if we're about ready to head back to Jordan, just in less than 2 weeks, for our 9th excavation season. We will be there in the field for 6 weeks this year, and each day during the excavation, we send out an update showing photographs of what came out of the ground that day, what's happening, a little commentary, so a day-by-day recounting of what's going on with the excavation. You can get those email updates by using your smartphone or your stupid phone like I have. Just text Dig Sodom to the number 22828, then it'll instruct you, give you a text back how to enter your email address, and you'll get our updates. We do those during the year about once or twice a month, but during the excavation season, we do it every single day. Now, I'm going to go fairly fast through this presentation, and it's nice to have a clock right in front of me, so we're going to be moving as quickly as possible, but I hope you can see the slides well from where you are. The existence and location of Sodom and the cities of the plain is a perfect test case for the historical accuracy of the Bible for at least 3 reasons. Number one, most scholars do not believe that Sodom and Gomorrah existed at all, much less got destroyed by fire out of the sky. All right? So most scholars have doubted the existence of Sodom and Gomorrah, period. By the way, it's shocking to know that in Israel, for example, most scholars, most archaeologists, 99% of them, do not believe that Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, and Joshua were real people. So there's a heavy-duty denial of the historical authenticity, accuracy of the biblical record in general in the scholarly community. So first of all, this issue is important. But second of all, most scholars who have believed or do believe that Sodom and Gomorrah are real places put them at the south end of the Dead Sea, or put them in a completely erroneous place. If you watch National Geographic, except for the one we did with them, National Geographic, History Channel, Discovery Channel, they're all dealing with some place toward the south end of the Dead Sea, and as we'll see, it's completely wrong according to the biblical text. So people have put them in the wrong place. And by the way, there's nothing down there to support the story. Therefore, this has given a wide open door to liberal critics to come in and say, see, there's nothing there. So we can reject the reality of the story. The third thing, if a legitimate, and that's the key issue here, and by legitimate I mean work, archaeological and historical work that is done under the auspices and in coordination with the academic, scholarly, archaeological community. There are a lot of people running around there claiming to do biblical archaeology, but they're really not connected to the community. They're not members of the American Schools of Oriental Research. They're not connected with departments of antiquities in various countries and so on. This is very important to do it properly, because if you don't do it properly, it cannot and will not be recognized by the scientific community. So, if a legitimate, scientifically rigorous investigation into the locations of Sodom and Gomorrah can actually result in discovering those cities, and not only discovering them, but showing that they were actually destroyed in a manner commensurate with how the Bible says they were destroyed, that is a powerful confirmation of biblical historicity. It is a powerful confirmation that what the Bible tells us is true. And let's not forget that Genesis itself is the most doubted book in the Bible. It's the most challenged and most doubted book in the Bible. Stories like this, like Sodom and Gomorrah and fire out of the sky where God destroys an entire civilization in the blink of an eye, these things are not believed by most scholars. But if we can confirm it archaeologically, scientifically, then we can have a powerful confirmation that the biblical record that we have is factual. So we've got 12 years of scientific research, exploration, and excavation on this subject, and I believe we're finally setting the record straight, not only on the location of the cities, but the factuality of the story itself. But that doesn't mean that there aren't some liberal scholars, we call them minimalists, that they believe the minimal amount of the Bible they can get away with. Minimalists still reject the idea that these stories could be true. Here's one, Dr. William Deaver, who, by the way, I've had to Albuquerque to speak to my students several times. He's a great guy. We really enjoy one another. We have some good conversations, but he does not believe the cities ever existed. This is a quotation he aimed at me on the front page of the Wall Street Journal a few years ago about our project. He said, "No responsible scholar goes out with a trowel in one hand and a Bible in the other." Yikes. You know, I don't like being called, do you like being called irresponsible? No, I don't either, and I didn't appreciate that a whole lot. But here's my basic response to him. Well, no responsible scholar goes digging in the Holy Land without a trowel in one hand and a Bible in the other. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. The reason is simply because, bottom line, the Bible is still the best, the most comprehensive historical and geographical document or set of documents we have preserved from the ancient world. Period. End of discussion. Okay, it's still the best. So not to use it would be borderline crazy. It just is not smart. All right, so we have to have it. Now, the stories comprising the text of Genesis are what I call serial geographies. That is, they take us from place to place to place to place. In the Bible, this would be Old and New Testament, but mainly here for the Old Testament, nothing happens. There are no characters introduced, there are no storylines introduced without place. It is extremely important. Let's not lay that aside. If God bothers to have all this stuff written down, and it deals a whole lot with geography, then might we conclude that God likes geography, or that it's important for us to know geography? Absolutely. By the way, I'll tell you one reason why it's important. Anybody ever heard of a little publication called the Book of Mormon? How much verifiable geography exists in the Book of Mormon? Zero. How much authenticatable geography exists in the Bible? A lot. A lot. Volumes. All right, now, the stories are serial geographies. They're going to take us from place to place to place, and all of that is trackable. All right. Now, a lot of scholars have overlooked this fact. Ancient Near Eastern writers, whether they be Bible writers or whether they're Babylonians, Egyptians, Hittites, or Bible writers, whoever they are, they do not invent fictitious geographies. They don't. There's no such thing as Middle Earth or 5-acre wood in ancient writing. Okay? Everything they tell us, whether the stories themselves are fact or fiction, the stories are layered over a real-world geography. They are not mythical constructs, and the Bible geography has no mythical geography, and that includes the stories of Sodom and Gomorrah and the other cities of the plain, as they are generally known. Now, this is a little geographical lesson. This is the kind of thing that I do late at night, like 3 in the morning. You think about things like this, and then you get up and head for the biblical text and jot all this stuff down. But just in case your after-dinner conversation lags at some point, you can throw this kind of stuff in and kind of pick things up a bit. What kind of things what kind of data from the biblical text causes us to put certain cities, towns, and villages on Bible maps? Well, the Bible gives us geographical indicators, like a particular city is next to this mountain near this river, 10 miles from this other location, and we can triangulate around those geographical data, and we can place them on Bible maps as a result. Now, here's my geo top 10. I really have my top 40, but I didn't think I'd belabor you with the top 40 at this time of day. Here they are. Now, the little number at the end of the line is how many textual indicators, how many little directions from the biblical text are given to take us to this site. All right? And these are all on the maps. Beth Shemesh, Azekah, Timnah, Jezreel, Jericho, Shechem. I don't know how 3 and 4 got flipped here. Jerusalem comes in with a whopping 18 different geographical indicators in the Old Testament text as to its location. Now, what's interesting here is that all of these sites will appear on Bible maps, whereas the city of Sodom will rarely appear on a Bible map, and if it does, maybe 1 or 2% of Bible maps will have Sodom, but it'll be there with a question mark. What's interesting about that is Sodom comes in with a whopping 25 different indicators in the text as to its location. If we can locate Jerusalem with 18, why can't we locate Sodom with 25? What I'm going to suggest to you this morning, as you will see very clearly, is that it's all a matter of failing to read the text. If you don't take the Bible seriously and you don't read the text carefully, then you're not going to take advantage of all of that information, and you're going to wind up in the wrong place. Now, most of the old scholars of the 19th centuries, these explorer scholars who spent sometimes their entire careers riding around the Holy Land with a Bible flopped over their saddle horn, looking for Bible places by reading the text and following the indicators. And they put Sodom and Gomorrah north of the Dead Sea for a lot of good reasons. And here's a Bible map. This was published in 1881. And you can see that we have the cities of the plain of the 5 cities, or cities of the plain. This is the area of Sodom and Gomorrah, north of the Dead Sea. Now, they put that there for really good reasons, because they followed the geography of Genesis chapter 13. So, when we're talking about locating Sodom, I often encapsulate it in 3 things: right place, right time, right stuff. You can get those 3 things right. By the way, right stuff, it's in the text. You read the text, it gives you the indicators, but we'll go through that. Right place, right time, right stuff. If we do those things, we ought to be able to find it. Now, what's the right place? Let's do a little geography lesson this morning. Quickly. I mentioned Genesis chapter 13, and the reason we mention that is the principal biblical text that gives us the location, the map, to go to Sodom. It was specifically written to take us to the city of Sodom. In fact, this is the only narrative passage we have in the entire Bible that is specifically written for the purpose of taking us to the location of Sodom and Gomorrah. There is not another one. So this is the one that we have, and it has a lot of data in it. So let's look at the text. Here it is. So now I've cut out a few little incidentals here, but I've kept the geographical information. So Abram went up from Egypt to the Negev. Lot went with him. From the Negev, he went from place to place until he came to Bethel. to the place between Bethel and Ai, or sometimes as we say, Ai. Lot looked up and saw that the whole plain of the Jordan was well watered, like the garden of Yahweh, like the land of Egypt, toward Zoar. So Lot chose for himself the whole plain of the Jordan and set out toward the east. Abram lived in the land of Canaan, while Lot lived among the cities of the plain and pitched his tent as far as Sodom. All right, so there's the text. Now, in this text, the word plain appears 3 times. Throughout the Sodom stories, from Genesis 13 to 19, it appears 10 times, and it's the same word used over and over again. What's interesting about this term is that there are a lot of Hebrew words, 4 in particular, for low place, valley, bottomland, plain. These are those, Bika, Emek, Mishor, Arava. But guess what? This word is not one of them. The word translated plain all through the Sodom narratives is not any of the Hebrew words that have geographical significance. This one, in fact, is not a geographical term at all, as we'll see. It is the word kikar, the Hebrew word kikar. Now, what does kikar mean? In the Old Testament, it's used 68 times. 55 of those 68 times, it means a talent of metal, a flat circular disc, okay, a talent, as in talent of silver, talent of gold, or it refers to a flat circular loaf of bread. I think I'm far enough in the southwest here to say tortilla, and everybody comprende tortilla, okay? So that's what we're talking about, flat breads, flat circular bread. So I always say talents or tortillas. That's what the word means. Well, there are no geographical uses of this term outside these, the usages in the Bible. These 10 in the book of Genesis and 13 over the Old Testament. That's the only place. I'm not going to say too much more until I put this back on. There we go. All right. That's the only time it's used in a geographical way. Never outside the Bible in any ancient Near Eastern document does it ever have a geographical meaning. This is not a geographical word. The word simply means talents or tortillas, but they use it just like we do in New Mexico. We call flat-topped hills mesas, the Spanish word for table. Why? Because it looks like a table. Table is not a geographical term, but we call flat-topped hills mesas because they look like tables. So you see how that works? So here we have the use of the word tortilla because the place looks like it. Here it is. And remember, it's the cities of the kikar, the tortilla. It's the plain or the tortilla of the Jordan. Now, here it is. The Jordan River comes down narrowly in the valley until it comes to the northeast of the Dead Sea, and it widens out into a large circular area, the floodplain of the Jordan River. This is the kikar, or what I call the Jordan disc. Here it is from a different angle. Here we have the disc. And this is what it's referring to because it looks like this. And by the way, when you stand on it, now Abraham, the writer of this text, didn't have a satellite map to determine that it looked like a disc. But if you stand in the middle of it or you stand around it, it absolutely gives this impression of a very shallow bowl or a plate. So the kikar is exactly what it is by shape. And it's north of the Dead Sea because, number one, Ha Yarden, the word Jordan, never ever refers to anything other than the Jordan River proper, and it means, by the way, the descent. The descent. Do you suppose a descent, the descent, would end when it reaches the lowest spot on the face of the earth? It can descend no further. So Ha Yarden, the Jordan, ends at the Dead Sea because that's the lowest spot on the face of the earth. So, and it never includes any part of the Dead Sea Valley in the Bible, but it actually ends at the Bay of the Dead Sea, at the mouth of the Jordan, below Pisgah, according to Numbers, Deuteronomy, and Joshua. Look at this. Here it comes. Here's the Jordan River. It comes into the Dead Sea. There's the Kikar of the Jordan, and the Bible says it ends at the mouth of the Jordan below Pisgah. So when we're talking about the Kikar of the Jordan and the cities of the Kikar, We're talking about an area north of the Dead Sea. It's very clear. But there's more. The Bible says, remember, it says it's well-watered. It's well-watered like the garden of Yahweh. Springs and a river running through it. Go back to Genesis chapter 2 of the Garden of Eden. It says there was a river running through the garden. So the Jordan River splits the circle or the kikar right down the middle. It's also watered like Egypt. This would not have been lost on Moses, by the way, who's putting this passage together. Where did he grow up? He grew up in Egypt. So he recognizes that this river, the Jordan, in miniature, matches the same kind of hydrological system that the Nile has. It overflows its banks every year, and they plant behind the receding waters, and this drove the rise of Egypt. The same thing happens in the Jordan River Valley. The Jordan overflows its banks annually, and they plant behind the receding waters, and it is just like a Nile in miniature. So it floods, and there are also other rivers coming down into the area. Seasonal runoff on the west side, and perennial rivers on the east side, but these stars represent springs. There's also a lot of spring water coming out of the ground still today, because the entire Transjordan aquifer dumps into this area. All right, now, it says that Lot could see the entire Jordan disk, all of it, from the area of Bethel and Ai. We have to ask the right question. Where was he standing when he lifted up his eyes and saw that the whole plain of the Jordan was well watered? He was standing at Bethel and Ai. And so if we look at it, now north is to the left here, so the kikar there is on the north end of the Dead Sea. And you can see that there, by the way, those are the traditional sites of Sodom and Gomorrah that everybody talks about. Now watch this. I excavated at Bethel and Ai for 6 years. I know what you can and cannot see from that area. What you cannot see is the southern sites, because they're blocked by the hills. There's no way you can see it. But on a clear day, you can catch a glimpse of the north end of the Dead Sea, and you can see the entire kikar if you position yourself on a high hill. So this is what Lot was looking at. The Bible also says that he went eastward. This is very specific. Here we are again. Here's Bethel and Ai. Lot traveled eastward. Doesn't ever say that he took a right turn anywhere along the way, or that he went around the Dead Sea and went down to nearly the south end of the Dead Sea. He went simply eastward from Bethel and Ai, and he pitched his tent as far as Sodom. That's where Lot went. So Sodom can only be there east of Bethel and Ai, by the way, equidistant from the river as Jericho. Why? Why can't you build next to the river? Remember those inundations. Yeah, it would be not smart. So you get far enough away from the river that you don't suffer that every spring. So Sodom and Gomorrah cannot be in the Dead Sea Valley, as most people place them, but it has to be north of the Dead Sea. Now, that's pretty cut and dried. Now we're going to do another exciting venue here, and that's chronology. It's important. Why? Because it isn't good enough to be in just the right place. You've got to be in the right time frame. And what is the right time frame for Abraham? They belong to what we call the Middle Bronze Age, sometime between 2000 BC and about 1500 BC. So here's the Middle Bronze Age, and Abraham and Lot belong to that time frame. Okay, all Bible scholars and archaeologists, if they believe in Abraham, would agree that that's the sort of the face value biblical placement of Abraham chronologically. But there's more. Genesis chapter 10 takes us way before the time of Abraham, pushes us all the way back to the earliest urbanization period in history. The first cities are built around Genesis 10. And what's interesting about that is we know archaeologically when that occurred. It's called the Early Bronze Age. This is the time of the building of the earliest actual cities. It took place there. So Abraham and Lot belong to the Middle Bronze Age, but Sodom is listed in Genesis 10 amongst the great urban centers there with Babylon and Akkad and Uruk and Nineveh. And it's mentioned there in Genesis 10. So in order to have the right time frame for Sodom, in order to find it, we've got to have the Early Bronze Age and the Middle Bronze Age and everything in between. That's the proper time frame. If we find a city and we in the right place, but we excavate it and it doesn't have this, then we don't have Sodom. Simple as that. All right. Now, What I've drawn here is all the known roads, ancient roadways, road systems in the area north of the Dead Sea. Now, that's really well known by everybody because Joshua took that city out much later in time. But what's interesting is you see that it sits at a major intersection, and from there you can go in all kinds of directions and see what's there. But look at this. There's a big intersection on the other side of the river. It's a huge intersection. What's interesting, prior to our research and prior to our publication, not one single journal, archaeological journal, not one single archaeological map published by the Israelis, the Jordanians, the Americans, or the Europeans put anything on that piece of real estate. In fact, Anson Rainey's excellent Bible atlas, The Sacred Bridge, which is considered the most scholarly Bible atlas, gives us a map for every period, starting with the early bronze and the intermediate bronze and the middle bronze, and shows what's all over the Holy Land. And guess what? His spot is blank. His spot east of the Jordan River, north of the Dead Sea, is blank. There's nothing there. Look at that. There's a major intersection sitting there, and there should be something there. In fact, there was, and there is. Now, how many of these sites might there be in that area based on our discoveries and research over the last few years? Well, there's a big one there. There's also sites dotted all along these. In fact, there are over 14 major archaeological sites in this area. They all have Arabic names. We've even actually had to name a couple ourselves because they were unknown. And Tal el-Hammam, there is a huge archaeological site sitting at that location that had never been paid attention to before. Very interesting. Here it is, Tal el-Hammam, and you can see the area around it. It looks like the well-watered plain of the Jordan. They're growing banana trees there today, all kinds of crops. And this is the best agricultural land in the region. The site has the early Bronze Age. It also has the intermediate Bronze Age and the middle Bronze Age, matching all the biblical periods in which the site is mentioned. All right? Now, that's the right chronology. So everything is there chronologically, not only geographically. Now the right stuff. The city of Sodom was fortified. Now there's lots of stuff in the text about the city, but here's one really important one. It says Lot sat in the gateway of Sodom. He sat in the gateway of Sodom. If you have a gateway, what do you have? You got a fortification, all right? This is the Genesis 10, I call it the Genesis 10 city wall from the early Bronze Age. This is just the stone foundation of it. It is 18 feet thick. Okay? Massive fortifications. In fact, these are some of the largest fortifications ever discovered from this period. This is Dr. Rittmeyer's reconstruction drawing of that gate. In fact, there are 10 to 15 such gates in the city during the early Bronze Age. But when we shift to the Middle Bronze Age, a whole new set of fortifications is built. This brown thing represents a massive earthen rampart built by laying bricks. This is the only fully mud brick rampart ever known. About 100 to 150 million mud bricks to build that thing, we now know. You can see some of our excavation areas in yellow. But let's look at this. This is my wife and I standing on the defensive rampart of the upper city. You can see that it has about a 35, 36 degree slope and very difficult to get up. This was their primary means of protection. In one place on the site that we've excavated, the defensive system during the time of Abraham, this is from the Middle Bronze Age, it is over 100 feet thick. It's absolutely stunning, the size of the fortifications. In this slide, in yellow here, you can see the early Bronze Age city wall going around the site. Then they've added to it during the Middle Bronze Age to make it even thicker and to put towers. This is one of the gate towers. And there I am standing in the tower. It looks like dirt because it's mud brick, and all the dirt around it is decomposed mud brick. So here's that one tower, and let's look at it again. Here you can see the early Bronze Age fortifications and the Middle Bronze fortifications going around the southern end of the city. And there's the entry to that tower. There's also another tower there, and then the main entry to the city located there. By the way, that was a very exciting day because that was number 1 on my list. Genesis 19:1 talked about the gate that Lot sat in. Well, here it is. This is just a rough mock-up of the southern defenses of the city. We know where all the towers are, and now we know the gate system very well. This is Dr. Rittmeyer and I standing. I'm standing in the tower, left tower. He's standing in the entryway. And remember, everything's down except for the foundations. Everything's destroyed, but we can see the stone foundations. Now, Dr. Rittmeyer is sort of one of the world's leading authority on the archaeology of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, but also one of the world's top architectural reconstruction artists. So I did this myself. This is just a little PowerPoint version of it. Now that's to scale. That shows you what everything looks like. I've just built it up from the ground, but Lane looked at that and he laughed at me. And he said, let's do a proper reconstruction drawing. So this is his reconstruction drawing of the gateway to Sodom. So there it is. This is what it looked like in the days of Lot. This is a little reconstruction of the city, what it may have looked like during that period of time with its upper and its lower city. Now, that's all just fun, isn't it? Just geography and chronology. But you know, with all of that, what everybody really wants to know is, how bad was the destruction? Did you find the destruction? And how terrible was it? Well, we just like to know stuff like that. Well, here it is. In the 2007 season, we ran into it the first time on the Upper Tell. There's an Iron Age fortification built on top. Most of the city was never touched after it was destroyed. But in this place, they had built a small fortification over the top, and there's a meter, 3 feet of black ash and destruction debris. And that's true all over the site. It's really, really ugly stuff. Some of the mud bricks, this is a mud brick from the palace area, it is fired hard like pottery. Now, they don't fire their mud brick. They build with sun-dried mud bricks, just like we do in New Mexico. But yet, some of these have been heated to such a high temperature that they ring like porcelain when you hit them with a trowel. This is wattle and daub. This is roofing material, also fired hard. It also has a high sulfur content. Don't have time to talk about that. But this was one interesting thing that we discovered early on in the dig. We found many, many more evidences of this, what I'm about to show you. But this is the first one that we found. This is a sherd of pottery. It's just a piece of pottery. It's on the shoulder of a large storage jar. Okay? And we find tens of thousands of these that look like this. But we have a few that are kind of unique. And when you flip this one over, you can see that on the opposite side, on the outside of the vessel, the surface of the pottery is in fact melted into glass. Now what's interesting about this, and you can see this dark material, that's carbon. This is carbon separation from the silica as it melts. The other feature here is you see these little nodules of calcium. This is also an elemental separation at high heat. Calcium begins to separate out of the glass, out of the silica. And what's interesting is that this thing on the left is our Middle Bronze Age pottery sherd from the time of Abraham. And we have many more of these now. The stuff on the right, which is identical physically in every way, we've had all of this analyzed at New Mexico Tech. It's continually being analyzed there even now. But what's interesting, let me tell you what we know about it. That stuff is trinitite. That's from ground zero of the explosion of the first atomic bomb near Alamogordo, New Mexico. Okay? They are physically identical. In fact, when I handed this sherd to the USGS geologists, the scientists that were working with this, first time they saw this, they said, "Oh, nice piece of trinitite." I said, "Flip it over." I said, "Oh, it's pottery. Where did you get this?" "Never mind, just run the tests." Now, they had el-Hammam Excavation Project written all over it, but they didn't know the implication. The word Sodom was not used in the reports, all right? So what's interesting about this is that now, what does it take to do that? We've had this thing analyzed. The surface of that Middle Bronze Age pottery sherd, which was in a clean sealed locus, about 9 feet down in the excavation, that can only be produced between 8 and 10,000 degrees Kelvin, which is about 12 to 15,000 degrees Fahrenheit. That doesn't happen geologically. It doesn't happen on this planet. Can only be done cosmically. Okay? And I don't have time to go into that. I would say read the book. That would be a good thing. That analysis is in there. But we now know that it was an extremely high heat event. In fact, all the mud bricks from the buildings are blown off the southern end of the site. We now know the trajectory of the object. And by the way, the Hebrew says that God sent down fire and goprit. And you know what goprit means? It's sometimes translated sulfur or brimstone. That's not the actual meaning of the word, not during Abraham's time. The meaning is burning stone. Burning stone. God sent a meteoric event upon the city. We know it came from the southwest because the entire southern defenses and the southern domestic areas of the city have their mud brick walls completely blown off their foundation stones, and many of the foundation stones are heat fractured. On the north side of the city, opposite, in fact, sitting behind the upper tell, we actually have mud brick preserved on many of the foundations. So the southern was the impact, took the brunt of the impact. This is desert glass. This was found 4 kilometers to the southwest of our site. Now, this is not terrestrial. This is impact glass. This is produced only by cosmic impact. You go to the meteor crater in Arizona, you go to other sites around the world, you will find this kind of stuff. Now, how big was the area? The area was about 400 to 600 square kilometers. The entire Kikar was instantly destroyed. All the cities on it went down at the same time, toward the end of the Middle Bronze Age, during the time of Abraham. In the ash matrix, we have lots of bone. This is human bone scatter. It's as if people blew up, literally, if they weren't if they didn't just simply vaporize in the event. They exploded. This is very much like what you see in a nuclear setting. What do we find in the ash? Children's wheels off toys, beads, pieces of jewelry strewn through the ash. This stuff is ground up. It's horrible destruction. Personal seals. In the gateway area, we excavated ash. Look at this stuff. This is ash fall after the event. By the way, there's a high iron content, little micro spherules of iron all through this ash. It's about the weight and density of wheat flour. So you know how heavy flour is. That's the heaviness of this ash. Here is the domestic area. What do we find? All kinds of pottery, all kinds of stuff. By the way, in this kind of explosive event, very unusual to find anything very large intact. Few small things, but most things are just absolutely exploded in there. Now, look at this. If you go around to all of these sites, the Bronze Age continued just fine, but on this piece of real estate, where the cities of the plain were located, the Bronze Age came to an abrupt halt during the time of Abraham, and nobody lived on this land for the next 700 years. Now, we got to put some facts together in closing. Bronze Age civilization on the eastern Jordan Disk, with el-Hammam as its center, was continuously going for 2,500 years or more, without a break. For 2,500 years, it lasted. It included el-Hammam. And el-Hammam and all the sites around it came to an abrupt and fiery end toward the end of the Middle Bronze Age, and it remained without cities and towns for the next 7 centuries. Now, those are 2 facts confirmed by the archaeology. What you have to do is put those together into a question. And that operative question is this: why did the best watered agricultural land in the region remain without cities and towns for 7 centuries following its violent destruction? Well, I think we do know the answer to that question. Now, so the Sodom narratives carefully mark out a location for the cities of the plain north of the Dead Sea, east of the Jordan River, where in fact ruins of great Bronze Age cities exist, exhibiting all the cultural influences that the book of Genesis talks about. Such a high degree of correspondence between text and ground cannot scientifically be considered a mere coincidence. If in the past, remember I talked about the blank archaeological maps. This is something we are now sort of shoving under the nose of archaeologists. If in the past, archaeologists and Bible scholars had taken the Sodom tales seriously, they would have discovered the civilization in the land of the Kikar. By the way, that's what the Bible calls it in Genesis 19:28, the land of the Kikar. They would have discovered this great civilization a long time ago. But they didn't take the biblical text seriously, and they didn't find it. We simply took the biblical text seriously, used the text, went to the place, we did, and guess what? We did. We found it because it was there all along. So, in closing, I would just simply say this. All of this is in the right place. It's exactly where the Bible describes the cities to be. It's in the right time frame, and it has all the right stuff. And so, with that, we can say that the city of Sodom is likely found. Well, the Bible and the trowel do work together quite well after all. Thank you, Dr. Deaver. Now let me spin your head on this next few slides for just a couple of minutes. This is all well and good, but this is tough stuff. This is difficult stuff. I spend most of my year traveling around raising money to support the excavation. It costs us about $500,000 to put a team in the field every year. Then we have another $2 million put down by 100 or so volunteers who pay all of their own way, all their own airfare, all of that, and make it happen. It's an expensive project. I titled this presentation this morning, "Why Does the Discovery and Excavation of Sodom Matter?" That's a nice geographical exercise. It's great to support the Bible historically, but why does it really ultimately matter in our world? Well, let me tell you why it matters. Quickly, a little history. European Christianity was a vital force for world evangelism from 1850 to 1900. Just let that sink in for half a second. European Christianity was a vital force for world evangelism from 1850 to 1900. Was the greatest missions movement in history. Now watch this. By 1945, barely 50 years later, Europe was declared post-Christian by historians. And it remains so. Now that should shock us, because America's not far behind. Same thing is happening to us, because what happened to them? Here's what happened. Specifically, liberal, German, higher criticism undermined European confidence in the historicity of the Bible. They decided there wasn't any Moses, there wasn't any Joshua. Moses couldn't have written the Pentateuch. It was all made up. Well, that ate Europe up, caused people to lose confidence in the Bible, and it collapsed. Christianity collapsed in Europe. Now, we are dangerously close to entering the post-Christian era. There are a lot of historians who are just about ready to ink that. All right? Biblical archaeology is the most powerful means of demonstrating the historical authenticity of the Bible. You can't think of anything else that will even come close to this in dealing with matters of history and factuality and science. All right? It is the most powerful thing in this arena. The el-Hammam Project is the cutting edge of biblical archaeology. There is not another project, there's nothing else going on in biblical archaeology that even comes close to what el-Hammam Project is doing in terms of the biblical historicity. Now, well, let me camp on that last one. Your generous contributions to this will impact the way the next generation views biblical history. Are they going to believe it? Are they going to reject it? Okay. This is it. We've got to give our kids and our grandkids some reason to believe that text, because the rest of the culture is going to be telling them it's myths and legends and nonsense. We've got to build some strong walls in their lives against this erosion of Christianity in our culture. That's why it's important. We'd love for you to link up with us to help us. We're going in 2 weeks. We're heading out. We're still raising money. We're going to be raising money to get home. Not really. But we're going to be raising money all through the season because it's very expensive. All of our testing, our analysis, and by the way, these laboratories don't do this stuff for free. It's all very expensive. We just ask people to ask God, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to get involved? And we can show you how to do that. God bless you. When you pick up that Bible, I want you to have a tingle go from your fingers up into your arm, to your heart, and all the way to your head, because that book is true. It's true. All right, thank you. A question?
Thanks for your support of Wingmen Ministries. We would love to hear your comments about today's show and help you get connected with other men in your local area. To keep up to date on upcoming events, element groups, and speakers, please visit our website at wingmen.org. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for our email list.